How's it going, Steven? Good to see you.
Good to kind of sort of see you. Good to see your canvas, I guess.
See the important part of you.
Yeah, exactly. Do we want to do like a little bit of a materials thing? Like you're working,
Sure.
what are you using?
So I'm using oil paint. I'm painting with one of the biggest brushes I own onto paper. Just
Yeah.
standard oil painting paper that, comes in a block from Arches, which is actually pronounced Arch, but most people pronounce it Arches because there's an S, but, French. And
There's all those
and
French pronunciations like that Canson paper, it's mi temps, I think is the way to pronounce it, but it's spelled like Tientes.
oh, that's gracious.
But I give it the old English pronunciation because like I feel like I'm not gonna match the French one, so I'm like embarrassing myself trying.
Makes sense. But yeah, it's just a paper that I've painted. I just put a simple imprimatura of burnt umber on it. And now I'm trying to block in the biggest shapes that I can see, which are the shapes of the background, just so that I get a better idea of how large my figure needs to be inside of my
Yeah.
format. And yeah, I feel like the most interesting materials question is you're working in graphite, but your paper's not white. Can you
Yeah.
can you bring the viewers into that decision?
Yeah, sure. Depending upon like how you're going to study something, right? Or like or what, let me actually like start that over. Depending upon what work you're studying, you want to kind of consider how you're going to study it, right? Like if you're thinking about studying a Rembrandt painting like this one, for sure it's not about line quality, right? So I made a kind of calculated decision that I'd want to be working a lot more with like shapes and edges, and really kind of values in a way. Even though it's in graphite, I won't be like fully black or fully white or whatever. But I wanted to get some range of kind of value out of it. And graphite, for all of you out there, I know you all have experience using it. It doesn't want to give you value for free. Like it's not the easiest thing to do. It's not like charcoal, where you can just get really dark values really fast. So I just took and rubbed a bit of like a paper towel that was kind of saturated with graphite powder over the top, just to give myself like a base layer, so that eventually when I start erasing away the light shape, that's going to kind of stand out already. And when I start to push in some values other places, I have kind of a baseline that's a mid-tone.
And just to kind of follow up on that, because I'm totally on board and would have done the same thing if I was keen on using graphite, or even I probably would have started with a pre-stained paper, which is something that I really like just working on brown paper. But
Yeah.
more often than not, if I was faced with this kind of image, I mean, when you told me that this is the Rembrandt you want to do and you want to do it with graphite, I was like, how is he going to go about it? And I would have picked charcoal. So why not charcoal?
That's just about scale. I mean, I'm a big advocate of the whole, like when I'm oil painting, I think, try to use the size of the brush for the size of the subject I'm painting, right? So,
Mm,
when it came down to working like this size, if you look at my hand, like the size of the drawing is not so large.
mm.
And for me, for the way that I like to draw, I thought, well, I wanted a little bit more space to kind of express my shapes. And so the pinpoint of a pencil tip, um, for me, is a little bit more, gives me a little bit more dexterity in those small spaces. Uh, so that's why I chose it that way.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think right now this is the most interesting, I think, moment to see how two absolutely very very different beginnings, as far as I can tell. Hopefully, both will turn out to be satisfying pieces. But how about you walk people through this blocking in mode that you're using, because it's very different from mine, and I'm interested in
Is
hearing
it?
how you're thinking
I
about
guess it
this.
is a little bit.
Oh, it's
The
very different.
I haven't had time to look at yours yet. I just
Yeah, it's right
I
in
just
front of
been
your
looking.
face, Steven.
Yeah, sorry I wasn't watching, Ken. I apologize.
Don't worry about it.
Um, the no, so I think, by the way, in about 15 minutes or so, I'm not sure that they're actually going to look all that different, but for now, we'll say, yeah, they have a lot of difference in between them. Uh, Now, probably all you can really see that distinguishes what I'm doing from a technical perspective is just that I'm using straight lines, which, you know, where I studied, it's kind of like an implicit language that everybody has to speak.
Mm.
Um, and it's not everywhere. Like there's a lot of, places, a lot of schools where you learn where that's just never even addressed. It's never even an idea. In fact, probably, they'll say, oh, straight lines, they're so crude and they're so like overly simplistic. Um, what they allow me to do at this stage, right? And I wouldn't confine their usefulness to just one stage of a drawing, but what they allow you to do in this stage is just to focus on proportion. So I'm just trying to figure out like what is the overall width of this guy versus the height of this guy. How much does this space, how much is this related to like the right hand side of the forehead we're seeing. So I'm just trying to kind of plot out a head inside
Mm.
this space. And in that way, like the simpler the better. So like the less nuance or sensitivity I have in my drawing actually at this moment, the more I'm actually able to be sensitive to those kind of bigger picture kind of needs,
I smell some Barg influence there.
There's definitely like you start on Barks. Um, I don't know. No, I know that when you studied in Israel, I don't remember exactly the teachers that you worked with or the program precisely. Did you go through Barks as well?
Oh my God. I went through rigorous barging,
Yeah,
but it wasn't really part of the program per se. It was kind of like, well, actually, this leads to a fun personal story, I guess. I think I'll tell it because we have a
let's get
lot of
personal,
students here.
Ken. Let's give the people
Yeah,
what they want. The
we're
people want
opening up.
personal.
We're opening up, people. So the way that it went for me is when I got accepted to the quasi atelier program where I studied in Tel Aviv.
Yeah,
Initially, they didn't want to accept me because my level wasn't up to snuff, and they said I was too young, and
yeah.
that I shouldn't be there really.
How old were you?
Uh, what?
How old were you?
I was 21,
21. Okay.
and so like fresh out of the military.
Yeah,
And what I said, I was argumentative. I was as argumentative then as I am today. And what I
yeah.
told them is, give me a trial month. If after a month I still like suck a lot, then you can kick me out and all will be well and no hard feelings. So
There
they
would have been
kind of
hard
took.
feelings, Ken. Let's be real.
So they,
There'd
they
have been a
kind of took.
couple.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm just saying what I
You would just
said.
say to get it in the door, to get your foot
Yeah,
in the
I just
door.
wanted to get in the door.
There's no hard feelings. Like it would have been totally cool.
Yeah. But anyway, so what happened was we started the year, and they were of course kind of correct. They know their stuff, and I was really overwhelmed by drawing from the model. I could not for the life of me understand how the people around me were successfully doing what they were doing. And in the first day of class, the faculty came together to kind of recommend Barg not as something that is, integral or necessary to the program, but just as something that they consider to be very useful. And so they said if we have like extra time, we should devote ourselves to that and consider, and everybody fully ignored it. but
Yeah,
but I knew that I was in deep trouble because I really wasn't on the level. So I said, all right, well, I guess I have to take any help that I can get. And so I turned to Barg, and I basically just did Barg for the entire first month, and they were satisfied with the fact that I was rigorous and trying my best to really find a solution to the fact that I have no experience.
yeah,
But then I ended up continuing just doing a lot of Bard studies for about 5 months.
yeah,
And by the end of those 5 months, I don't want to be a snob or anything, but I was one of the, like, my level was more than satisfactory, in relation to the rest. So it did so much for me in helping me catch up
yeah.
and teaching me the basics. So the way I like to say it is that if I ever get a tattoo, it'd probably be a Bard plate. It's it's very, very close to my heart. That you could say it's like one of those tear-jerking stories. It's like my life was saved by Barg. Like he was really there when nobody else was, and helped
Yeah.
me really get some kind of understanding of how to get into this world, which before that point I found completely overwhelming.
Yeah. So when you did them though, everybody has a little bit of a different experience, and I always find this is like a point of diversity in people's education. Like, how rigorous did you got critiques on them from your teachers or no?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
You
did.
did, you did. How rigorous were they in terms of like what were they focusing on with you?
In terms of the teachers.
Yeah, yeah, like in terms of like accuracy in your copy and things like that.
Oh, it was 100%. Like we had to nail the value structure perfectly correct, nail the shapes perfectly correct. Like there was really no leeway at all. And when I'm presented with obsession on
Hmm.
that level, I tend to wanna level up that obsession. I respond well to obsessive kinds of activities. So what happened to me was, and you're gonna laugh. Uh, so the barred plates in the book, they're kind of the pages that they're on have been a little bit darkened by time. They're not like on
Yeah,
white paper; they're a little gray. So
yeah,
I literally was finding it too difficult to nail the value structures absolutely perfectly without staining my paper, my white paper, a
yeah,
little bit with some charcoal powder, just so that I know that I'm responding to like exactly the kind of value structures that are in front of me. So I went so
sure.
far as to actually like stain my paper before I started a barb,
Yeah,
because I wanted the values to be absolutely perfect. But yeah, I think the most important lessons that I learned from Barg is, of course, this is the lesson that everybody should learn, is to keep your light mass simple and keep your dark mass simple,
yeah,
and focus all your attention really on the edge between them. That for me was revolutionary. That you can really afford to let go of so much detail inside of the light and inside of the dark,
yeah,
as long as you make sure that the edge between them is very, very interesting. I would have never guessed that. And Barg totally opens your eyes to that. And I say opens your eyes because once you understand it, when Barg kind of shows that to you, you start seeing it everywhere. It's like, oh my
yeah,
God, and they do that too, and they do that too. And then suddenly it's just like art history becomes kind of like a window that you can look through. And once you understand this convention, I feel like you're already on such a higher level of understanding. And I think nothing can really drill that through. Like, I mean, to the people watching, you think the fact that I just said it is enough to understand it, but
no, there's
it
no
really
understanding
isn't.
in just hearing the words, that
Yeah,
this
it
is
really
something.
isn't. Like, even
Yeah,
very careful note taking of what I'm saying right now, it
yeah,
doesn't drill home the understanding that you get from actually making those copies and seeing, oh my God, like when he says nose, doesn't say, but expresses nose, he literally just means shape with edges around it. Like, and that
yeah,
is it, just keeping everything super simple. And for me, that's really the most important lesson. And then there's a sub lesson that kind of builds on it, is the fact that how far can edges really go? It's not just like soft edge, hard edge, which everybody understands, but it's like short edge to long edge, and edges that are uniform, edges that are kind of more dispersed. It's just like there's so many different kinds of edges. The variation between them adds so much richness to the drawing that and it's commonly overlooked, I think, by people. They think, oh, this is a blend and this is a not blend, very, very
yeah.
binary. And Barg really opened my eyes to the variations that you can see uh, in edges, and you kind of never look back. Once you go Barg, you don't go back, I think.
Did you what did you think of the previous design course from the École des Beaux-Arts, or the was it the Académie Julienne, or wait, no, it was the École des Beaux-Arts where they used it, but it was an artist something Julienne, the course before Barg made his.
Um, I looked at it very, very briefly,
Yeah.
And I didn't really go in depth, so I don't want to kind of express an opinion because like I know some defenders are going to say that I'm ignorant, so I'm saying outright like I'm not totally an expert on that, but I felt like it was less successful, less clear. I feel like there's something about Barg as a teacher that is, teaching is a skill, and I think he really understood, probably was a better teacher than he was a painter, at least in my opinion. He really
What?
understood how to
What?
communicate.
What? That is the hottest take I have heard in 40 years. I'm sorry for
Seriously.
everybody who happens to have their volume up on this. I just shouted in your ears. A better teacher than he is a painter. Oh my goodness, Ken, the Hot Take Hall of Fame.
Why am I
You're
why am
gonna
I
have to
wrong?
like get on
Why
the
am I
phone with that.
wrong? Come on,
Have you
scold me.
seen his paintings? They're
I have.
fantastic. They are magical, especially for somebody who's living in New York, by the way, who has access to one of his absolute best paintings at the Metropolitan.
Yeah, I mean, you'll you'll
Whoa.
you'll pardon me, but it's
Don't
like
walk it back, Ken. Don't walk it
I'm
back.
not
Just
go
go
I'm not
deeper.
I'm not going to. This is just, there people look for different things in painting.
Yeah.
And for me, this kind of goes back to a conversation that we had, which you're eventually going to release. So teaser, people, get ready for Steven releasing that conversation. We were talking about a little bit of the difference that I see between illustration and painting.
Mm.
And for me, it feels almost like the control that Barg has in the medium. He kind of uses it to, I don't want to sound simplistic, but depict stuff. It sounds like, oh, I'm going to use all this talent to depict person, render scenery, render landscape, rendering.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, a lot of people can render, and for me that doesn't level up enough in terms of like the emotional resonance that I'm hoping to get from a painting. Like when I'm looking at this Rembrandt that we're both, staring at, I'm not
Yeah.
seeing a rendered face. I'm seeing something deep and spiritual and philosophical and really profound, and I just don't totally get that from Barg. He's a bit of a technocrat.
Sure.
And so for me, the technique, it's a little bit like, it might be part of also like growing up for me. Not that I'm saying that's the way it is for everybody, but at first, when you just kind of learn painting, you're very, very, very overwhelmed by technique.
Yeah.
But the better you get and the more the technique becomes kind of clear to you, like how these things are actually done,
Mm.
you start to look for more in these paintings. And I find more in Rembrandt, I find more in Velasquez, but I don't really find it in Barg. And that's not to say that I think teaching skills are in some way inferior. Like both you and I teach, and I think it takes a lot to be a good teacher and a good communicator, and it has like insane importance in terms of like how do you take the knowledge that you've gained and pass it on to the next generation of artists. Like that's something that I do not at all take for granted, and I didn't say it as in
No,
like
no,
a
no, no. I
demeaning way. I
absolutely
think he
not. I
was a
didn't take it that
fantastic
way at
teacher.
all.
Yeah, he's a fantastic teacher. For me personally, his paintings don't, I mean, they don't measure up to, he wouldn't be in my top 20, maybe top 30 you could find him, or top 40. But there's just better painters out there, I think. I mean, I know.
Hey, listen, opinions, people got opinions. I get that. That's not one that I'd engaged with before. I needed to hear some background on it. I mean, there is that sense, I do get that feeling a lot. Actually, when people talk about Jean-Léon Gérôme,
Uh-huh.
they'll go a lot into, oh, Gérôme, he's so great, he's so great. I personally, that's one where I'd say like I don't really see it. I don't really get it, because you are going after that technical. And by the way, let's not say that being technical is not a kind of expression. I mean, there's a reason why people like early Mozart,
Right.
and it's not because it's very emotive. It is because it's very technical, and it does kind of express something in that way. Um, but people will say that about Jerome, and I find that, like, especially when you look at it next to Barg, I find it. This is all right. This is a hot take. I find it technically lacking. I find like his technique is
Ooh.
like a little bit like stilted. Like it's kind of it's good. It's really, really good. But like you get up to this really high level and you start kind of, again, you just compare it to Barg and you see like the fluidity in the way that Barg was able to do exactly what Jerome was trying to do. He just did it like so much better that it kind of it ruins a little bit the comparison. Does that make sense?
Oh, I'm totally with you. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever I said about Bard, you can multiply and say it about Jerome. Really, I don't. I would never like find myself in a mood of saying, yeah, I need to look at an art book and would like open like never. I would never open a Jerome book.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not envious of his ambitious and like all the blah blah blah. Like insert necessary like disclaimers here. Uh,
Yeah.
but still, I mean, it doesn't really. That's not what I'm looking for when I am going to the masters for inspiration.
Yeah.
And all this like Orientalist stuff, I kind of also find a little bit hard to look at today, which might just be my 21st century perspective. I even find it a little bit difficult to look at Eng doing it, and Eng is one of my all-time favorites. But still, when you see all these like bathhouses and all that kind of stuff, it just, I don't know, just hits me the wrong way. I don't know if you can relate.
Well, with Ang, I feel like, and we'll just split the pronunciation there. I've never,
Yeah.
I've never like gotten a pronunciation I thought was like unequivocally correct. So
Yeah.
I'll just say Ang, you can say Ang, and we'll know who we're talking about. But
Yes.
uh, I, you know, I think Ang is like very interesting from a historical perspective. Like, there's artists that I appreciate like that, which is to say, like I don't really go for that to them for feeling. I go to them for something else. And with Ang, it's for
Oh,
what?
sorry. I just realized where this was going. Okay, please proceed. This is gonna be the hot take of today.
This is gonna be the hot take. No,
I
I
think
just
so.
with Ang, yeah, I just kind of I think it's interesting because you have this whole dichotomy, between him and Delacroix, and you have this line versus color, which, by the way, I hopefully everybody out there is a little bit familiar. The whole line color debate. There was these two artists were supposed to be the polar opposites, right? That Ingres was into to line and neoclassicism, and Delacroix was romantic and into color. Um, I should come down on the side of Ang because I prefer line to color as a mode of expression, but I don't actually.
Oh my
So it's
goodness.
this
I
weird
would
like
have
outlier
never
for
thought.
me.
I would have
What?
never believed it. Oh my God. If I would have bet like my entire savings account that you would come down on the Ang side. I'm shocked. I don't know if you know, but he's one of my all-time favorite painters, probably tied for number one.
Yeah,
I think so. That really justifies us having an in-depth discussion, I guess, on why I think he's amazing and you find him slightly lacking. But I'm almost more interested to hear what you find in Delacroix because I never found much about him that I found like I just don't relate to his stuff almost at all. And there was a big retrospective, Delacroix retrospective in the Met a few years ago,
mm-hmm.
and I went there with a completely open mind, thinking I should get on this train. People really love him, specifically a painter that I really appreciate, like Vincent Desiderio, will not shut up about him. So I'm like, okay, if Vincent really loves him, then I guess I'm missing something. And I went there hoping to be persuaded, and totally was not persuaded.
Yeah.
So can you persuade me? Help me.
No, no, actually, I can't. I mean, the Delacroix Ang thing is simply my lack of feeling for Ang, not so much my feeling for Delacroix. Like
Mm.
it's more a kind of game of alternatives, uh, like I mean, there's like interesting moments in Delacroix, like in the same way that I feel about Fortuny.
Mm-hmm.
Like oftentimes I love Fortuny's like his whole thing, but I'm hard pressed to say that there's like a group of his paintings that just knock my socks off.
I see. Well, even if and even if you like when you look at the for example, the Ang portrait in the Frick, right? Like that girl there that has the mirror behind her. That doesn't do much for you.
Yeah, I mean, all of his work that I've seen in New York, yeah, if I'm perfectly honest, it's really more like I think about what neoclassicism was in painting. Like
Mm,
neoclassicism is really fascinating movement for me because I love so much neoclassical architecture, and I
mm,
love like neoclassical design and decorative work and really almost everything about it. Neoclassical sculpture as well. Not my favorite, but still I really quite enjoy it. You know, Carpeaux and all that.
mm-hmm.
But you come to painting, and I just feel like it never landed in painting. Like we all know Jacques-Louis David, and he's got his place in the history books. And I feel like when we start out painting, we all feel like we're supposed to go like, yeah, David. But you know, he's another one that I just it's fine. What? No, come on, you're a David fan as well?
Love David. Love
What?
him.
Oh
Love
my
him.
goodness.
I love him, Stephen. I
Ken,
love him. I
this
unapologetically,
is
I'm a
very
huge
strange.
fan.
Yeah.
I'm so it's that's so interesting because we've been talking for a little while now, and I feel like there's been a lot of consensus, and then now we're like discovering all the differences
Yeah.
live on the air. So it's like shocking. But for me, I think probably the most striking experience that I've ever had in painting, period, ever, is seeing David's Oath of the Horashi. How would you call that in English?
I
Horachi?
always thought it has that kind of double I thing, Horatii. Is what I always
Horatii
thought.
sounds about right. So yeah, when I saw that in the Louvre, I do not remember ever feeling so strongly about a painting. You know, it just I almost like my knees buckled. I couldn't
Yeah.
believe what I was seeing. It was
Had you been
just
walking through
so.
the Louvre for a long time that day? I mean, it could have been just exhaustion, Ken.
Mm. Well, that's
Sorry,
that.
sorry, that was such a
Oh my
jerk thing to
God!
say.
I'm. It's not so easy to make me feel speechless, but this has been accomplished just now.
I'm sorry,
Wow.
Ken. Excuse me for
No,
that. I apologize.
it's totally okay. I mean, I'm really interested in that, but yeah, for me, David is like ultimate like revenge of the nerds. You know, we with all for example, like what do we love about Rembrandt? It's like, the expressiveness, the immediacy, like all that kind of stuff that you would expect from a genius, like all these it's like an explosion, right? But with
Yeah,
David, you know that it wasn't there. It wasn't this kind of raw talent. He was a planner. When you go into the history books and you see all the sketches that he made before every one of the paintings, and
yeah,
he was so meticulous about design. It's like, what if I move the chair this way? What if the chair changes the direction of the legs? What if there
yeah.
is like a backstand, no backstand, hand here, hand there? It's like he was, I just relate to him so much on a personal level, and wish that I was on that kind of trajectory of because from okay, a slight bit of a tangent here, but for me, something that's really lacking in art, period, and that I would really want to see more of is rigor in design.
Yeah.
Very, 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 like, okay, so you can paint the people, nice work, I get it. I love paintings of people, but how are they organized in the format such that this depiction is transformed into an unforgettable image? And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't accuse you of that because I really love your design, but I do accuse a lot of our peers, in being very, very focused on how to make a beautiful representation, but not a beautiful design. And I really feel like nobody can teach that and communicate that and show how important it is than David. He's really
Mm.
like quintessential designer artist. And I,
Yeah.
when I try to think about my figurative work, wherever I see, for example, faults in it, which I do a lot, but it's always like, okay, if I didn't really paint the nose perfectly, then I'm kind of fine with it. But if I messed up the design,
Mm.
I can't stand it. Like
Yeah.
it's an unforgivable thing to do, as far as I'm concerned, to mess up the design. And I feel like I owe David really this way that I'm thinking about it.
Mm.
He's just the best at that, at really, really caring about
Yeah.
how things are organized. And I you know, I'm with you in terms of the technical stuff. You know,
Yeah.
of course there's better ones, but temperament
Yeah.
and the message that, like, I send my students to him all the time so that they start caring more about composition. And if I didn't have
Yeah.
him, who would I send them to?
Yeah. You know, by the way, and I just want to say, like, you know, probably I haven't done a live stream in ages, and so if also for the people that follow me, but for the people that follow you as well, I just want to mention, right? Like, I really dig the approach. Like, there's so many interesting things about David, and I can enjoy that, and that's very much what I try to espouse in the kind of what we love about show, right? It's like there's plenty to talk about David and say it's great. You know, so I don't want to come off too like unbalanced, right, in this expression. I mean, he's obviously got his place in history for a really fantastic reason. Um, but anyway, just, you know, off the back of what you're saying there, you know, I too can very much appreciate those aspects of his work. And also, like, when you come to neoclassicism, I think that's what you come to it for. Is that sense of design. I think it's one of the things that has actually allowed it as a movement to allow its like aesthetic voice to still be actually very relevant today. You know, there are still, you know, buildings being built, you know, interiors being designed with this kind of neoclassical conception of design. Um, and it's
Hmm.
beautiful. It's amazing. It's full of
I'm
harmony and
actually
balance.
interested. I'm actually interested in lingering there for a second and ask you, because I'm not a how do you say it, like, nice moment to lose my English, architecture buff.
Yeah.
How do you separate neoclassical architecture from classical architecture?
Well,
I
I think
wouldn't
it's
know
just
how to tell the difference.
a particular movement, and a lot of these things also have to do with era. So like even when you say, you know, classical music, a lot of times when that's being used, and again, this is not coming from a place of being like the academic authority on these things.
Mhm.
You know, I'm a dilettante. I study because like I just appreciate certain things. But like when you're talking about classical music, you're talking about the classical era. It's not actually a stand-in for all like instrumental, you know, music, right? Where
Mm.
nowadays you hear a symphony and you'll say, oh, it's classical music, but that's almost like referring to all painting as impressionism or something. It's not, it doesn't work like that. Now, to differentiate from, you know, as you were saying, like classical architecture from neoclassical, my
Mhm.
understanding is that also is about era rather than, and there will be differences, also stylistic differences in between those eras, but I don't think I could really pick those out in,
I see.
like walking down the street to go, ah, I see this facade here. The design is neoclassical rather than classical.
Mm.
I could say maybe, you know, you could look at two buildings in a book of an architectural text and say that that one is Baroque and that one is neoclassical. I could go that far.
Okay, that for sure. That for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It's just because recently I've been involved with a project that really geeks out on these kinds of architecture. So I was wondering if you have a take about it, because I could kind of steal it for the purposes of that project. But
Okay.
it's really focused around a Renaissance architect called Palladio.
Hmm.
And it seems, you know, from what I've been gathering as being involved in this project, that he kind of canonized a lot of the stuff that, you know, he loved in classical architecture, meaning like actual classical architecture, like Greek and such.
Mm. Mm.
And then he put it in kind of like mathematical formulas in very influential architecture books, like I think they're called the Four Books of Architecture.
Hmm.
And ever since that point, you know, people have been drawing inspiration from Palladio and kind of applying these principles again and again.
Mm.
And so it's kind of really interesting that, you know, we got neoclassicism, we got Renaissance, which is also
Mm.
a kind of the same thing, because Renaissance is rebirth, and then we have the classical. So there's kind of like a triple, it's a triple thing, you know. It's like the
Mm.
original, then the sequel, and then the end to the trilogy. So
Yeah.
I'm personally very interested in how those iterations, you know, the Renaissance iteration and the neoclassicist iteration are different because they were both looking to the same kind of inspirations, but
Yeah.
arriving at substantially different results. Like, at least if you look at painting, like Renaissance painting and neoclassicist painting, they're very, very different. So
Yeah.
probably the same could be said with architecture, but maybe we should have that architect on, the one that I'm working with for the podcast. Maybe we could question him, and we'll get the full story.
Yeah, we could do I wouldn't mind actually to do like a three-person pod. No, this is like, sorry, this is like bit like work talk in the middle of our live stream. But yeah, no, I think it'd be technically not too difficult to have like three people on for a chat. Maybe we do that sometime. But yeah, by the way, did you drop the other one? The you released our chat, right?
Yeah, I did. Oh yeah, that's a good plug. So people, whoever likes, okay, so Stephen and I have been talking. Some of these interesting talks are on the record, and the first of these interesting talks that's on the record is live now, and you can go listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts, except for Google Play, because I haven't successfully put it on there yet. But it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on all the nice places. And you can find it by just looking for my name, Ken Goshen, or the name of the podcast, Art School with Ken Goshen. And you'll find the first episode there. Steven says a lot of interesting things. I say a lot of semi-interesting things. So you definitely should listen to that. And very important, you should subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You should subscribe because that helps the show grow. And this is the kind of show that I know we all want to listen to, except for me, because I don't like listening to my own voice. But yeah, and also, after you subscribe, the next best thing that you can do is to share the episode with a friend and say, oh, you got to listen to it, and subscribe. That's how you help us spread the word and, get more people to be geeking out about art. Like, isn't that the mission? I think that's the mission.
Definitely arts and media, you want people geeking out, you know. I think it's, the thing that I always reflected on, I've been teaching online for a couple of years now, so this is, and I worked in ateliers for about maybe 10 years before that, 12 years. Um, I was always kind of interested in like what the main differences were for students in terms of their experience, right? Like where were the divisions in between learning
Mm-hmm.
online and learning like in a analog atelier, like a IRL atelier, right? So like you hear this sometimes that people will like, from IRL ateliers are gonna like go, oh, you can't learn online, So rather than actually just copping out like that, I tried to think about, well, what is the kind of difference? And one of the things that I kind of hit upon was that kind of slightly missing sense of like shop talk, right?
Mm.
And it's actually things that at an atelier, like I'm not going to say like you took for granted, you appreciate them because they're there, but it's just so omnipresent. You're always like talking about work. You're always talking about, you're introduced to like so many ideas just because you have this kind of incubator of like so many people just, constantly researching and working towards this very similar goal. So, art podcasts, I feel like, or I mean, and by the way, if we're mentioning shows, I'll just mention also, Ken will very soon be released on an episode we did of What We Love About. It's the show that I have on my YouTube channel, Stephen Bauman Artwork on YouTube. And in that show, like what I really want is for people that kind of show up there to get that, the return on the investment of their time, right? To get that kind of shop talk, right? That sense
Mm-hmm.
of just like appreciation of these like different artists and different eras and different techniques and things, to kind of fill in those gaps of experience, that the IRL ateliers just come with naturally, right?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, honestly, before the age of Corona, I might have been the person with whom you would have argued about whether or not it's even possible to teach online, because I wasn't doing any of that before. But since that crisis hit and I had to cancel all my classes, and so I was moving whatever I could online, and now I teach exclusively online. And I mean, I discovered that there are so many benefits to teaching
Yeah.
online, things that I could not have done in person. And it shocked me because, you know, I'm a kind of like, it's hard to move me. Once I have a format that works, I'm like, I want to just keep doing what works. But, you know, I would have never imagined the how easy it would be to like explain something to students online that in person I was finding it really difficult. Like, for example, if I were to explain, you know, here's the shadow shape, when I'm on Zoom, I can literally trace it. And you've been, you know, you've been really doing excellent work with all those diagrams that you're putting on there. I mean, when I was teaching in the museum, I couldn't like just go to the painting and draw on it.
Yeah.
And it's become one of my favorite teaching tools. So I think there's some silver lining that we can actually identify with how crazy this crisis has been. But I think
Yeah.
the people who were open-minded and tried to find the how to make the best out of a suboptimal situation actually
Mm.
came up with really useful and interesting things.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's you know, like I said, that's the kind of attitude I took into it was just like, well, here's this thing, you know, what do we do with it? And you know, by a long shot, you know, we, us, we're not the first people kind of doing this. So it's a quite long tradition, actually. Like, you know, speaking in terms of like long in terms of internet time, right? Which is maybe 10, 20 years of people like integrating this learning into working online and things. So far from being like unproven, right? It was just not investigated, I think, is actually
Oh, for sure,
where
definitely
you get
by
that
me.
you hear the most like vehement you know, disagreements with studying online from people who have never attempted to do anything about it, you know, which is
Oh, that's
again, it's
exactly
fine, it's
me.
up to them,
I
but
was to blame for that. Really, I mean, I was a hater. I'm not ashamed to say it. Like,
send your
I
emails to at Ken Goshen for those of
yes,
you who feel
please
like
address your hate mail to the link in my bio. It's
yeah.
that's what I but yeah, my mind has completely changed on that, and right now I really do feel like and this I don't want this to sound like hippy dippy or anything, but you know, the internet is doing a lot to bring the art community together. I really
Mm,
feel it, and it's at a time where when community is just very important, you know, and people are kind of stuck at home and they want to kind of see what artists are doing, what artists are talking about, and trying to see if they can learn something from it. So I
mm,
think doing these kinds of things, I mean, I don't know the kind of feedback that you're getting, but I'm getting really, I mean, heartfelt feedback, really, that people are saying, you know, I wasn't even thinking about painting to kind of spend the time during quarantine, but now I've been watching what you do and I've been painting every day. And it's like these things, you know, they sound like a small thing, but for me it's pretty big. If I can see that putting these kinds of things out there is actually encouraging people to spend more of their time painting. Like, that's why I teach. I mean, I teach
mm.
because I want to have more good stuff out there. I want to see better art. You know, better art makes me happy. So I'm very happy to spend my time uh, helping better art get produced by people who want to produce it. So for me, that's really been a source of great happiness during this difficult time. The fact that I can make some kind of minor impact on people's quarantine experience, and to show that art can be done even with limited means and with being home.
Mm, for sure, for sure. The by the way, let's briefly. I've kind of just noticed this as I'm listening to you. We haven't actually talked a lot about Rembrandt. We've been
Ah,
talking about
who's
Ang and
Rembrandt?
Delacroix. We've hit like every other artist that you can kind of hit, but like we haven't mentioned a word about him. Now, I kind of chose this one. I'm sure we'll do another live stream where you'll choose the artist and the artwork. I happen to have chosen this one, and I've gone through like phases with Rembrandt. Like he's one of those artists who is obviously like on the Mount Rushmore of artists, right? Like, which by the way, I hope is like a kind of universal reference. It's that like mountainside in America that they like carve these presidents' heads into. Ken, you're with me here?
I'm totally with you.
Okay,
Totally with
so
you.
people probably know
100%.
what Mount Rushmore is. I don't have to like over explain that. But you know, so it's just used as a shorthand to capture like, you know, to stand in for like who are the greats, right? The ones that you put on the Mount Rushmore. Rembrandt has got to be one of those, both by like fact of like the popularity of his name, but also there's tremendous depth in his work, and whether you even like it or not, you can't deny it, you know.
Hmm.
So he's someone that I mean, I think the first day that you're painting, probably you already have heard of Rembrandt, you probably already know his work, and as such, like I've gone through different phases of my career where I felt actually very differently about him. Did you have that experience, or like you're
No,
all in and you never you were just you subscribe and then you're in. That's it?
100%,
Okay.
100%. But I'm really interested to hear your different takes that you had over the years.
You know, at first, of course, you just start with, and you mentioned this actually when you were talking about when you started doing blogs and things. Uh, you know, you said that you know it kind of, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, whatever, but you said something to the effect of like you kind of thought it was like magic. You couldn't like it didn't seem like people could really do that, or you couldn't see the way, the technical way to make that thing happen.
Hmm.
I hope I'm not
No, no,
misrepresenting you
no.
there, but yeah.
That's perfectly good.
Uh, but you go through that phase with Rembrandt where you feel like, what on earth? Like I've used paint. It's like sticky and it's sloppy and it's difficult, like, and I can't draw well and like all this other stuff. And how does he get away with so much? I guess what the Italians would call bravura, right? Like
Hmm.
so much, I don't know, style or impact
Do you want to
or
explain bravura to people?
I get well, unfortunately, like I'm not a very good Italian speaker, so I can't give them too much. But just bravura is like oomph, right? It's like punch. It's like confidence and expression, you
It's
know?
almost like Jimi Hendrix on the guitar. It's a little bit of a show-offy thing, like a virtuoso
Yeah,
way of
yeah.
handling paint that is also very self-aware of the fact that it's virtuoso and wants to put that front and center. I
Yeah,
think
like
that's how I would
Boldini would
think
be
about
like
it.
the ultimate bravura painter, right?
Right. Wait,
Or
who?
like late Boldini, I guess you'd have to say.
Oh, I would say Sargent is the greatest bravura painting, but maybe we shouldn't digress because
Well,
you were
wait,
saying.
greatest, I guess would be different because I would say that Sargent was produced the best paintings, but Boldini had more bravura.
I
Do you know what I
see.
mean?
Okay.
But so in a way, right? Like, and you know, we can go back and forth and say, well, Rembrandt, he was very humble. It wasn't about bravura. But you take my meaning. As a young painter, you look at it and you go, there's so much on that. You know, like
Oh
how
yeah.
does he manage to do that with this material that seems like totally useless to me, right? Like oil paint. At a certain point, it's just like, why are we doing this? Why are we using this horrible stuff? Um, or maybe that was just me. Uh,
No, no, no. I'm with you.
uh, so like you go through this period of admiration with Rembrandt. Hopefully, if you're able to see them in person, because goodness knows that the texts that you would see of his work, you know, 20 years ago, when I started, were not amazing. So you know, you get to see them in person, and you're very impressed. In fact, his self portrait at the Met, the you know the one
Oh God, so
is
amazing,
it's actually,
so
you know, this is
incredible.
oddly enough probably on my top 10 list of paintings, you know, in total, you know, just in terms of my appreciation of it, even though Rembrandt isn't one of like my most appreciated artists.
Hmm.
But that painting just wow, it just does
Yeah,
everything. It's like a blockbuster movie, but with feeling, you know.
right.
um,
So yeah, you were talking about your different periods of appreciation for
yes.
Rembrandt.
So, and I digress continually. So I'll try not to totally filibuster here. But
It's okay. I'm sufficiently intrigued, so I won't let you off the hook.
all right. So starting out, you know, you just, or I would just kind of, you know, roughly just, you know, admire and be in awe of Rembrandt without exception. You know, he made so much great work. You know, it was, you know, if you really wanted to, I guess you could find something to complain about. But, you know, why not just look at all the other fantastic work that he made and just appreciate it like that? So I did for the longest time. Uh, then of course you kind of go through this phase where you're like a student and you're learning some small amount of like vocabulary visually, and you start to go, what about those hands that he painted? You know? What are like those hands like on the, on the Jewish bride? It's not really fantastic, is it?
Mm-mm.
If you're just looking at raw, draftsmanship.
Right.
And this is what I mean. Like you have kind of different eyes at different periods of your career, you know? You get
Hmm.
that student eye for a while where you would deem it necessary to evaluate the hands on a Rembrandt painting,
Yeah.
which is just about like the silliest thing that you can do. But you do it because you're a student and you're young and impetuous, and so that's how you kind of, that's how you look at things. And you kind of progress into a place where you're starting to paint, and then you really realize again, like, gosh, now that I'm really getting this oil paint, I kind of know how to do a little bit of it. I can actually make a painting or two, but that actually makes me more impressed than I
Hmm.
was before I knew what oil paint was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like, so there was being impressed from a standpoint of ignorance, and then being impressed from a standpoint of a little bit of knowledge. So that's maybe like the second, or no, sorry, the third phase of my life with Rembrandt, right?
Hmm.
Uh, then you go into this phase, which is like postgraduate. I'm out there in the world. I'm like making artwork, and I start to feel like, you know, I'm looking at artwork out there in the world where people just forgot to stop like hero worshiping.
Mm.
Like where you just go like, I just want to do what Rembrandt did. I just literally want to try and do with all the impastos and stuff, and like all
Uh-huh.
the stuff that he like organically came up with that we associate with him, but we're trying to do it because we watched him do it, not because we looked at nature and thought, how can I solve this, right? Which is obviously what he was doing.
Uh-huh.
So you come to this period where you think like, no, you need to find your own solutions. You need to find your own way, and it's not just just using thick paint. I'm still a little bit mystified sometimes about the obsession with thick paint. I've been through it. I'm just as guilty as like anybody who's been through that thick paint
Yeah,
obsession.
you put paint on drawings. I'm just gonna call you out, man.
But
Calling you out, Stephen.
well, I think you start. Well, by the way, this is I don't want to digress. We go to the phases of my relationship to Rembrandt.
Okay, okay.
So you go through this phase where you start to go like, no, like, Rembrandt is a great painter from his era, and I don't want to just use earth tones, and I don't want to just put on thick paint because he did. I kind of have to find my own way to do this. And so I think you develop some ideas that are like, oh, Rembrandt, he's a bit like hackneyed. He's a bit, his paintings are all just a bit brown and like, whatever. It's not really speaking to me, like to my 21st century self, right?
I see.
So you start to think about like what's your relevance like in the moment, right? And we don't want to be prisoners of the moment, but we also don't want to be like, I'm not like a historical recreationist in the way that I make, where I don't just want to put on a Rembrandt costume and paint myself looking like this guy, right? Like that's not
Hmm.
what I'm here for. So you think for a moment, well, maybe I need to modernize a little bit in the way that I appreciate things and look at it through that lens.
Hmm.
So you shy away a little bit from Rembrandt. Then,
Interesting.
yeah, for sure. And you'll say things like you think his paintings are a little bit boring, a little bit brown, and they are, and that's fine. Um,
Oh my God.
no, it's okay. Listen, it's all right. I grew up like watching, Michael Bay movie. Like, you can't. How can you? I mean, they are quite literally. They're like slow and they're kind of old and brown. They require contemplation, and that's just not a thing that we do a lot these days. So, like to contemporary eyes, if somebody said to me that Rembrandt's paintings they look a little bit boring, I totally get it. I mean, yeah, sure,
Hmm.
but like
Fascinating.
you can look like deeper into that. If you kind of get on his wavelength, you can look deeper into that and find so much there. But like just expecting that we all look at Rembrandt and appreciate the depth of his genius, I don't know. Like we're not really raised with that. Like even like I mentioned, kind of symphony music and things like this, and like instrumental compositions. I didn't grow up with that. It took me a long time actually to acquire the taste to listen to I don't know, like Mozart composition or something, or Debussy or whoever it is that you're kind of into listening to. I didn't come equipped with that taste. It took a long time to kind of cultivate. So I think for people with Rembrandt, you should think about it critically, and you should ask yourself why you like it. You should go through some phases with him. If you just unilaterally, not that if you
Mhm.
did this, it's totally okay. You can do whatever you want.
No, 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 no.
But but
The
you should think critically about it and ask yourself why is it any good? I mean, because maybe, by the way, maybe you found like the ultimate kindred spirit, and maybe asking these questions leads you to understand in even greater depth what it is that you appreciate about him. But to appreciate the brand Rembrandt, that's what I feel like is that you go through that phase. I went through that phase just because it's Rembrandt. You have to like it, right? um, when you start criticizing and thinking about what you don't like about it, then you can kind of start to prove things one way or the other.
Yeah, I actually totally get what you're saying, and I relate, but not about Rembrandt. A similar experience kind of happened to me with Caravaggio when I was
Mm,
when I was young, and just kind of starting out. I think Caravaggio was, I mean, I don't think, I know Caravaggio was the painter who got me into painting. I mean, I looked at that stuff and I said, I have to do this. I need this in my life. And so I
mm,
basically owe Caravaggio all the all the pain that that has stricken my life since I decided to become an artist. But
yeah.
then, in a similar way to what you're describing, when I look at Caravaggio now, it's more like a nostalgia. Like I love the stuff that he did, and he was a great, dare I say, stepping stone for other artists to kind of build on the things that he came up with.
Mm,
But now when I see his work, it doesn't hit me as much as it hit me when I was just learning this stuff. But with Rembrandt, I'm going through a completely reversed experience. Like every passing day, I feel like I appreciate more and more about what he's doing, because I think I'm also like you in that I'm thinking, what is the relevance of this stuff in the century that we're living in? And I
mm,
think it's increasingly hitting on something that I wish to see more of, like more of the what you called boring, like more of the gray, more of the brown, more of the things that are not McDonald's.
yeah,
Things that don't give you immediate like gratification, that require some investment on the part of the viewer, something that's not, art Tinder, that
yeah.
you need to stick
Wait,
around
what is
there. If
that?
you if
What is Arc Tinder?
I'm like, just like I said McDonald's, I'm thinking Tinder as something that's like
Ah, okay.
quick, easy. I don't want quick and easy in my art. I want
Yeah.
I want to actually have someone, so okay, so I want to be able to create works that on the one hand demand attention, but on the
Mm,
other hand look like the way that you put it, the return of investment. It's going to be worth it if you stick around here and look at this painting for a few minutes. It's going to be worth it. And I think Rembrandt does it so elegantly. Like, it's clear that his work require you to stand there for a little while and appreciate them before you really manage to get all of what he was trying to say. But it doesn't feel agonizing to go there and start to examine. Like, it's not like looking at a Dali where you're just like, oh, come on, I'm not gonna look at all these different legs of all these different creatures. Like, you just get attracted, at least I do, I just get attracted to looking at the Rembrandt. And I find myself standing there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and the more I stand, the more I get out of this artwork. So he's
mm,
like the ultimate non-fast food painter, but he does it in a way that I think still invites even contemporary eyes to spend a little longer. And I think that's really where I would like to see art go back into a place where, things that are good will demand something of the viewer. And it's more of like a collaborative effort between what the painting offers and then what the viewer offers. Like, for me, you were talking about the suboptimally rendered hands if I'm a little bit misquoting you there.
Student Steve was
But
doing that, by the FYI. Just let's characterize it properly, where it's not contemporary sitting in the room right now, Steve.
right, right. And
I don't want to
but
get like I don't want to get those emails. I don't want to get those DMs, right?
yeah,
Like
you can send them to me.
his
Oh,
hands are just fine. Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah.
that they
Oh my God.
are. It's okay. It's all right.
But what I'm saying is that in my opinion, some of my favorite moments in Rembrandt are actually those quote unquote poorer representations of the objects that are depicted, because for me it hits on something deeper, where Rembrandt, for example, here's a description of an op like a very very Rembrandty experience. Like, you would look at Rembrandt from afar and you would think, oh my God, how did he paint that armor, or how did he paint that hand, or whatever it is, and then you come up close and it's like there's nothing there. It's like, oh, it's just a bit of calligraphy on some imprimatura. He literally didn't even paint that hand. It's like he picked up some pigment in his hand and just like blew it onto the canvas, and the hand just somehow appeared out of nothing, and there's barely any attention given there. And for me, that's so gutsy. Like, I just love it, because it also hits on something that I feel like is very contemporary, where you kind of make pieces that in some ways are participatory. It's like the hand doesn't get rendered just by Rembrandt. It gets rendered by, half of it is by Rembrandt and the other half is in the imagination of the viewer. And that is something that I really strive for. I want every viewer to paint that armor differently a little bit in their imagination. So this idea of actually rendering something not fully is and sloppily even, I find really charming. It's the kind of stuff that you get when you watch a band live. You would never get it on the album, but then then you like leave that live performance and you're like, damn, I wish I had that rendition. Like, the way that he kind of sloppily handled that guitar solo on stage was so much more emotional. And I like, the more I get older, the more I appreciate it. Like, as a student, I would be like, really, those hands are sloppy. But today I look at it and I say, gosh, I wish I had the guts to leave the hand looking like that. I really, really do, because often I see that in my studio practice. Like, I would have a charming moment, but it's not perfectly rendered, and then I don't have the courage. I go back and I fix it, and I usually regret it. Like, I love those magical little moments. It's not always there. Like, not everything is made to impress. Some things need to tug on the heartstrings.
Yeah. And then yeah, I mean, listen, all of that I can totally get on board with. I think it's interesting though, just to go back to those hands, because it is, by the way, like, it is a pretty, like, I'm not the first one to have talked about that. We're not the first people to have like kind of delved into that part of the conversation. It's precisely the part of me that appreciates neoclassicism that is actually bothered by the hands, because it is a question of design. I think the mature way to look at it is to say that there are no accidents on the canvas, and in fact, if they're designed that way, by the way, he wanted you to feel that they were awkward. If you know what I mean, like, not specifically that he would have taken a hand and said, I want to paint this not as well, but that to him that was not even a question. That the hand is awkward, that's great. That brings you into this picture in a different way. So it kind of points to like him being after something that I think was a little bit different, because
Interesting.
let's be totally fair. For sure, if he really wanted to, and he proved it over and over again in the early part of his career, he would have painted it as well as it needed to be. Like, he didn't forget how to paint hands. He just started chasing something else. And I think that's the kind of next set of eyes, like, in terms of kind of drawing out this narrative about seeing artists and paintings with different eyes. You start to look at it on the artist's terms rather than like on your own terms, right?
Absolutely.
And kind of accept that what you're seeing is a manifestation of all the choices like that he was working with. It's something that people do with Bouguereau all the time, and maybe someday we'll have like a Bouguereau talk. But the least interesting thing I ever hear said about Bouguereau is like, oh, if only he would have painted something with a little more, oomph, a little more feeling in it. It's like, go go to McDonald's, go to Burger King, if you want big yellow signs and flame emojis and stuff, you're not gonna get it from Bouguereau. Like that's not at all what he was interested in. So like, you know, go to some artist that wanted to give you that and you'll find it. But if you blame Bouguereau, like you say, oh, he's so boring. Well, that's not, he was not here to get you all excited and like revved up in your emotions. He's not that painter.
No, he's not. But do you really believe that there are no accidents on the canvas?
I
I
think
because
that it's an orchestration, right? Would you say that like Jimi Hendrix accidentally played the riff that he did in one particular performance and it was so amazing?
yeah.
Or is it more like a part of like his entire like body of work or performance?
I don't see a contradiction between the two. I feel like there's something about being a mature artist that I honestly don't feel like I'm there yet, really. That when something, I mean, okay, I mean, sometimes I am. I don't want to be too down on myself, but it's sometimes things happen that you don't plan, but you have to be mature enough to let go of your original vision to see,
Mm.
oh, that's actually better than what I plan to do, and leave it.
Yeah,
And
this is
and
just
that,
semantics though, because I just wouldn't call that an accident.
oh, I see.
I just think that's a part of the process, and you kind of get to love that part of the process. Like, by the way, he didn't get to a place where all of his paintings were good enough that just that kind of accident could kind of fit into it in just the right way. It's all orchestrated, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, if that's how you mean it, then
Yeah,
for sure, that's definitely it. But the reason that I want to stress that
yeah,
is because I feel that's something that in conventional like atelier education is not really discussed.
yeah.
Like in ateliers, it's all about like let's decide what we're gonna do and then do it. And I think
Yeah,
the painting process is way messier than that. Way messier than that. And a lot of the times, what you have to be is alert. You have to be alert to the fact that,
hmm,
okay, something unexpected is happening here. It's not exactly what I planned, but it takes maturity to say, let's embrace this if this is good. Okay,
yeah,
so it's not what I planned, but whatever. Like this is where the painting is currently, going naturally. And I need to be open to the fact that my initial vision was imperfect and has room for growth. And I feel like Rembrandt is very good at doing that. I mean, I can't
yeah,
prove it for a fact, but when I look at these things, some of it just looks to me like, gosh, nobody could plan that. But it takes a killer painter to look at that thing that just happened and say,
yeah,
okay, I'm gonna keep it. I'm going to integrate it into all the stuff that I
yeah.
clearly did plan and let it be a part of the final piece. And that's something that I really appreciate about Rembrandt. And for example, would be anathema to David, right? You
Yeah.
would this is
No, no, for sure.
unimaginable with
But
David.
this is just to go for a moment back to Hendrix. You know, I'm maybe, Hendrix is one example. You could talk maybe more easily about like jazz musicians, is that a whole aspect of the form is that improvisation is a part of it. So like when I say I don't think there's like accidents in Rembrandt's work, I'm not saying I think everything is planned. What I'm
Mm.
saying is that accidents in a way are part of the plan. You know
I
what I
see.
mean?
It's inherent.
Yeah, like, and you can play with that if you're fluid enough in terms of your mentality. You can kind of go with the flow, and if something like interesting happens, as you were talking about before, you can move, you can lean into it. You don't have to
Right.
fix it away. You kind of go, yeah, I could have seen this coming a little bit, but I like the way this is kind of going, and I'm gonna kind of lean into that thing. So I feel like for me, that's where I'm at with kind of appreciating, things like, maybe decisions, choices I wouldn't have made. They're just, I wouldn't have made them. Like,
Mm.
but I can appreciate that Rembrandt did.
Yeah, so I think we're on the same page there. If you
Yeah.
put it that way, then I almost start to wonder what is an accident. But I guess that's philosophizing for philosophizing for a different time, because I know for a fact that this is gonna draw us into very larger and unrelated, very much larger and very much unrelated topics. Man,
But
this is fun. Can I say that, or is that rude? This
is it
is
bad to say
fun.
it's fun? You shouldn't say it's fun. No.
Oh man, I know it's like forbidden in ateliers to have
Yeah,
fun
no.
while you're painting, but this is what a privilege, man, that we live in a world where we can both take an image off of Google and like learn from it. When there were painters like Dürer that had to travel to Italy for months on horseback just to get a glimpse
Yeah.
of Titian, right? It's
Yeah.
just extraordinary. I highly recommend to anybody who hasn't taken some of their quarantine time to look very closely at the masters and learn from them to maybe spend some time doing it. It's extraordinarily rewarding and, God forbid, fun.
Yeah. By the way, actually, it might be a moment just if I could take everybody's ears for a second. Speaking of like studying the masters and what you're doing while you're at home. 26th of October, I have a live workshop that is focused actually on centerline construction, and we're going to go through like actually a lot of like old master portraits. Maybe not old master. Actually, you just had a conversation about that, but like 19th century work and some contemporary work, but also like older master work, talking about planes and construction and processes that can really help the kind of beginning of your paintings and your drawings. Like I said, it's October 26th. Really, all you have to be is an active subscriber on my Patreon. Links in my bio. If you're interested in that sort of thing, you can find out all about it there. If you're not interested in that kind of thing, that's also totally cool. So I just thought I'd mention it, right? Because it's a thing I've got kind of going on.
That's necessary. Things are necessary to plug. So talking about exciting stuff, I have nothing going on my Patreon so on my Patreon page, but you should still sign up, because I never really know what I'm going to put there, but usually when I put stuff there, it's fun and surprising to everybody involved. So if you want something less structured, you can support my work at patreon.com/Ken Goshen. That's patreon.com/Ken Goshen. And when you sign up for Steven's Patreon and my Patreon, you signal to us that you love us doing this kind of stuff. And then we understand, oh, wow. I mean, after we do these lives, we get some support, and that really encourages us to do more of these fun things for you. So it's really, I think it's worthwhile, because we kind of want to put stuff out there that you enjoy, and you can do a lot to incentivize us to go that direction. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's totally fair. And it's just, like, I think, it's funny too, like with Instagram, you get so far inside of it. Like, I mean, like I said, I've been doing this. I've been on Instagram. I realized the other day, Ken, I've been on Instagram for 5 years.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's kind of crazy. Like, I just didn't really watch the time go by, but I've been on Instagram for 5 years. And like, I run my whole, I basically run a school on Instagram by this point, right? I have like, students and tutorials and yada yada, but you kind of take for granted that like if people follow you, they of course they know everything that you're doing. It's actually not at all true,
Right.
just due to the algorithm and the way things go. So so I feel like sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't need to tell people what's going on. I mean, if they're watching, they know, but I feel like a lot of times it's probably easy to miss things on Instagram too.
Oh, you're so right. And I feel like you might feel the same way as I do. Sometimes just posting something on Instagram like more than twice, I feel like I'm spamming everybody to death, and that they're gonna really suffer. But essentially, like it's likely that people have only seen it once.
If that, yeah.
And so, I mean, maybe we even do a conversation one day on Instagram for artists and kind of share our experience of this kind of potentially evil, but also a little bit necessary tool that artists should, I think, use to kind of create communities and start discussions around their work. I don't know if you're open to that kind of meta conversation.
I think it's really useful. You get a lot of with my subscribers from Patreon. I'm always getting questions from them, and people DM me on Instagram and stuff too, like kind of asking exactly about that, right? They want to know like how do I kind of get out there and kind of do stuff, and like what tips do you have? So I think that stuff's really relevant, man, because nowadays, and this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but I don't think artists have ever had it so good in the last maybe 100 years.
Wow.
I think I might have even talked to you a little bit about this on another kind of thing we were doing, but you know, just the fact that like you have this autonomy, you have this ability to like, whether you feel great about it or terrible about it, but you can be seen, you can put your work out there. Like think about like being an artist before social media, you had to wait for somebody to do it for you, kind of.
Right.
Like, you know, you could make business cards and you could go to galleries and you could do word of mouth stuff, but really like that's probably the hardest way to kind of get yourself out there. Nowadays, you know, you can kind of, I think you can kind of figure out what you have to offer and really put yourself out there. So I think it's fantastic, man. And you know, much more than like for me at least, much more than like a necessary evil. I think it's like one of the best things that happened to visual artists, you know, like I said, in about 100 years.
That's I mean, that's so optimistic. I love it. I mean, I totally relate, but also I just have this like, I'm so saturated with like the feeling of God, I wish I could paint more and do less of this, but I
Yeah,
understand that like even Rembrandt couldn't spend all of his time painting. Like
yeah,
and he was really incredible at some of the other stuff that he did because it was a necessary thing to do in order to get your work out there. For him, it was, you know, all of his etching expertise, you know, it
yeah,
created some of the, you know, more attractive quote content that he could widely distribute all throughout Europe.
yeah,
And I think maybe early days of etching was a little bit like what we are experiencing on Instagram.
well,
Like people
yeah,
can't
yeah,
experience the full painting, but at least it goes really far. You know, we can send
yeah,
3,000 etchings all over the world,
yeah,
and then people are like, "Oh, who's that? That's Rem." You know, it's a strange comparison. Well,
yeah.
but I'm kind of standing by it.
No, for sure. I mean, like, think about the invention of the printing press. I don't want to go too far, you know, digress too far to this. This is very far afield. But I mean, like, what that did to communication was nothing short of like the internet of its own day. Like, it made it so much more possible for the transmission of in that case, like ideas, thoughts, writings, etc. You know, it revolutionized the way people could get to know things. And obviously, just saying that, if you project that into our current context, I mean, that's certainly what being on the internet, social media, all those things, you know, it's a way for things to very quickly spread, much quicker than what they could. But anyway, I am digressing. I said I'm not going to
I
digress.
was gonna go Gutenberg on you, Steven. So it's a good thing that you're because I'm just like, oh, we're gonna talk letterpress. I'm gonna. This is. I don't know if I ever told you, but I'm a huge letterpress nerd. I used to run the letterpress shop at Parsons.
Okay.
So everything that has to do with old school typesetting, printmaking is totally up my alley. I really miss it. This is something that I haven't been able to do in quarantine. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I don't have a printing press here, but it's totally something that I take very seriously. Did I make
Hmm.
this hat too big? Can we talk a little bit before I
Yeah.
forget? Because I'm looking at what you're doing and I'm totally into it. But
Okay.
strict question: how do you think Rembrandt would have felt seeing you work that way? Do you think he was a proponent of like middle of the face kind of construction by the features, things like anatomy in general with his sloppy hands? How do you think he would have approached this live if he was doing this live with us? Come
I
on.
think it would have been
You
totally
know it's a good
mystified.
question.
I think it would have been totally mystified by the entire platform, is what I think, first of all. I don't know if he would have really understood how to work on Instagram Live. But after that, after he had spent some time figuring out that and you know, like telephones and airplanes and cars and things, after that, once he got down to actually drawing, um, I think that you know, I view a lot of things that happen with drawing and painting a lot like technologies in a way.
Mm,
So like the idea of centerline construction, I'm not sure if exactly that technology existed.
yeah, I
You know,
think it didn't.
clearly the symmetrical arrangement of the human body was something they would have been deeply aware of. And so, you know, the understanding and the necessity to draw both sides and create that like symmetrical structure, that really is what the center line is about. It's about, you know, catering your sense of design to the human body, to your subject,
Mm.
right? So I don't think there's a chance that he would be um, foreign to doing something like that.
Mhm.
I certainly don't think it would take on the personality that I think it takes on today, where it's like you have, the Andrew Loomis, technique, and you have these other technologies that have kind of sprouted up around like animation and things like that. So no, I don't think it would have been doing exactly the same thing. And by the way, I've kind of drawn this a little bit more, quite a bit more Rembrandty than I normally do, just because, like, and I know everybody can't see the painting that we're working on, um, but to look at it, it's very much a painting of light and shadow, and I mean,
Mhm.
by no coincidence, of course, because Rembrandt is this. He's the original painter of light. I was actually just going to say that. Um, but then, like, I was like, oh no, wait a minute, I'm going to weird territory talking about Thomas Kincaid. Um, which I guess I actually just have done. I saw myself putting my foot in my mouth, and then I did it anyway. Um, but so I've gone for approach that is a lot more kind of light and shadow based, rather than doing a lot of like constructive design, which I think, and this comes down to like something I said like quite a while ago when we were starting this. When you're copying a certain artist, it befits you to kind of copy it a certain way, I think.
Mhm.
Not
Yep.
that you have to like copy their style per se, but if I started this out by like drawing this Planier Loomis head, I think I would have been going across the river to get a drink of water kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if that's like the most efficient use of my time to look at a Rembrandt and study it that way. And what we all know, even with quarantine, like it's finite the time we have, so you want to be as useful as you can. Um, so yeah, for me, I didn't kind of go that way. I went a little bit of a different way. Whereas I think you could look at an artist like Sargent, like I do all the
Mhm.
time, and you can look at that and say, in the way that he blocked in, it practically is a center line construction. Like, the initial planes of his block in are so crystal clear, that it really benefits you, I think, to work that way and think that way.
Really interesting. Yeah, I was kind of asking that question also because I do notice a kind of as you described it, it's different from the way that you usually draw, and yet it still does contain that approach to a certain degree. So I noticed that it's modified and that you're using it slightly less in this particular portrait, and it makes perfect sense to me because, as you explained, like I don't think that when looking at a Rembrandt, that is necessarily the key that we should be looking at. It's not what he does best, I would say.
Yeah.
But also for me, I'm very attuned to this technique, I think, because it's so foreign to me.
Mm,
I from where I come from, like we never really learned that, never really did that, and I don't really do that myself up until today. And but I do recognize that it's very valuable and also kind of something that I feel like is very recognizably American. I mean, when I look at
mm,
American realism, I can usually spot it because I see kind of hints of that approach, and I say, "Oh, okay, this comes from that school of thought," which is I always think is pretty nice when you can kind of give away your heritage just by the marks that you put on a
mm,
piece of canvas. I find that to be one of the more delightful things about painting, that I could look
mm.
at something and within seconds I could probably have a very good guess. Oh, this guy went to this school probably between these and these years. I think that's
Yeah.
a bit extraordinary that we're able to do that, and that's kind of why I asked, because
Yeah.
it's a kind of like a signature thing, I think.
Yeah, like, and as far as like education goes, it becomes kind of a question of lineage in a way,
Mm.
that to me does become kind of a fascinating thing. You start kind of tracking this stuff back to its origins. You mentioned kind of Barg, so if you think about like my approach, like the way that I kind of go after the figure, but beyond even just like the superficial stylistic version of it, but like the way that I think about approaching things, right? Like I'm absolutely married to the idea that I go from the simplest expression of the subject to the complex. And that is so like ingrained in what I do through my practice. You know, it's I feel like I could barely not do it. You know,
That's
so but you
sorry.
don't know that. No, no, it's okay. You don't know that if you don't, you know what I mean? If you're not also familiar with where it kind of came from, you know, so you start to go back to looking at Barg, you start to go back to looking at Jerome, you look at their simplifications and their block-ins, and then it becomes like you can't not see it, you know, in someone's work when you kind of find out where they're coming to it from.
That's super
So
interesting.
yeah, 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 exactly. And I think it's great for students too because you know, I came into this like very uninitiated. Like, you know, I grew up in Miami and I didn't really have like a lot of exposure to maybe you know, visual, you know, culture that was kind of representational and complex and European like this. So, you know, it was just like it was like looking at hieroglyphics. Like, you know, I didn't know
Mm.
how to decipher it. I didn't even know how to start kind of thinking about it, you know, till quite a bit later. And I think that people come into things that way. Like, you know, we don't like come pre-programmed with this stuff, you know. Like you need to assimilate. Like I'm learning Norwegian right now, and let me tell you, man, language is no joke. Like like there's so much to it. Like, and I'm so bad at it. Oh my gosh.
It's what I was saying. The reason that I kind of cut you off and could barely contain myself is because I find it so interesting. Because I also think that in my approach, it's very ingrained to work from the simple towards the complex. I just think that in this particular instance,
Hmm.
that's not the simplest thing, in my opinion, especially with Rembrandt. You know, the eyes are barely visible, the mouth
Hmm.
is barely visible. Like I can barely see these things. So for me, the simplest thing is usually equated to, that's how I learned, the most visible thing. You
Yeah.
start with what you can see best. And if you
Yeah.
can't see the features so well because, you know, stylistically they're hidden, then that would be a strange way to start. So that kind of reveals a difference in, again, you called it lineage, which I love that word. But then when I saw you start, I was like, man, fascinating. He's like starting at a place where if that would have been done in my school, my teachers would hit me across the head. So it's really beautiful because, you know, these things, they have consequences, and I'm sure I've been doing some stuff, and you can call me out on that too. That, you know, if you saw me do that, you would probably tell me that's not how we do it in our school, kiddo. But it's just really awesome for me to see how within this quote narrow quote close quote scope of realistic art, you can still see completely different approaches, and
Yeah.
each has its own merits.
Yeah, this is like one of the, you know, one of the least useful things I ever hear about realist painting, you know, is that it like it all, you know, it all kind of looks the same.
Oh
I,
God.
it's like, man, you know, you got to grow some eyeballs, you know, because you're not looking at it. You know, there's such infinite diversity inside of this limitation in a way. You can think about representation as a limitation, and that like a limited palette is a limitation, but you can find so much complexity inside of it. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to point out my feelings about that particular observation
Oh
that I
yeah,
feel like
that's
I've
why I
heard
put it in
sometimes.
close quotes, because obviously
Yeah.
I don't feel that way. It's end of endless how do you say it, it disrupts my day whenever I hear it, and it's so super silly. And I just want to point people to the fact that, you know, the way that you start a painting, the way that you know, set out your course of action has, you know, it has consequences, right? Like the
Yeah.
way that you learn to draw, at the end of the day, it keeps on resonating throughout the piece. And it's a beautiful thing if you're a student to start paying attention to, and you can ask yourself
Yeah.
that question about, you know, the way David draws, and then compare it to the way that Rembrandt draws. Like calling both of those like realistic is heretical. Really, they couldn't be more different.
Mm, mm,
So I feel like when you're just starting off, you're so stricken by the success of the illusion. You're like, oh my God, this looks like people. And it just blows you away that you're actually missing the finer details and the nuances in their individual styles. And to
Yeah.
me, that's something that I would encourage people to be mindful of and pay close attention to.
Ken, I just want to give you a heads up. We have gone an hour and a half.
Oh, goodness me.
I know, and I think we probably gotta call it. We gotta call it a morning for you. Call it a night for me.
Right. Let's wrap it up, man.
Yeah, I got a little bit of ways to go. I'm probably gonna finish this one off camera eventually. But for now we gotta. What's that?
Cheating, Stephen.
What? Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay.
I'm gonna it's like a cooking show. I just take the finished one out of the oven and then.
Brilliant. Hey, Stephen, this was a pleasure, though. I really enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, same here. I hope that, by the way, that is more than us feeling that.
Oh, of course. Yeah,
hopefully
people know where they can send their hate mail, but if you want to send love mail, you can send it in the form of DMs or in the form of subscribing to our Patreons. Mine is patreon.com/Ken Goshen, and Stephen's is
Stephen Bauman Artwork, or patreon.com/Stephen Bauman Artwork. Links in my bio. Yeah, so that's all.
Brilliant. So logging off.
All right, yeah, I'm Steve Bauman. We got to do like a proper radio log off here, right? You got to go like, all right, thank you everybody. I'm Steve Bauman.
And I'm Ken Goshen. Peace out.
There you go. That's like the news anchor like sign off.
Bye-bye.
Bye.